Hello, everyone. Hey, it's Insane Pain here, art teacher extraordinaire. Mwah. Okay, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about watercolor. Okay, now it comes in two parts, water and color. Amazing. Oh my gosh. Ooh. So what I'm going to start with here is I'm just got just a standard watercolor palette. It's pretty clean on the top. It's got some staining, but that's okay. We just need to remember that watercolor might stain a little bit. So we want to make sure we don't just slap it on the paper, as it doesn't always work out very well. So what I want to teach you guys is, I love these water buckets. You can clean the brushes in here this way. I like to rest my brushes so they're in the water resting like that, because if you rest a paintbrush sitting on its side forever like this, it's going to start forming that way. It's kind of like bedhead. Yes. So, going to go ahead and get a little water here. And when I'm done, when I'm not using the brush, I like to store it in the upright position, so that way I don't accidentally knock it on the floor or something. And also, if I get in that habit, then I know where I put them. All right. So, let's start here. I got my watercolor palette, my watercolor drawing here from a watercolor palette here. And I'm going to create a color wheel here. But I want to start with just getting some water, and I'm going to fill up these little areas at the top here. Now I'll use a rag at the end of the session to clean up. So, but I'm going to put some water here, because this is what I call just prepping the palette. So that way I can have plenty of color in here, because I don't want to keep dipping into the base colors, because then sometimes you can muddy them up. And I mean, if it's your own personal watercolor tray, you might like to work a little muddy. I do sometimes in mine, but if we're sharing this with somebody else, they might not really appreciate that. So when I'm wiping and getting water off my brush, I either use a rag or I just kind of wipe it on the edge here. When I'm wearing my painting jeans, I usually just kind of brush on the side of the leg there, just on my jeans, but that's just me when I got my grubbies on. All right, so I'm going to start. Now, I've got some kind of clean water here. Now, I don't mind, I'll probably in the middle take a break and go get fresh water, because I like good clean water. But I've got my watercolor tray here, or my palette. And I know that yellow is probably the lightest color. I don't want to start with blue and violet, even though I love cool colors. I know that they can be a little dark and stain and muddy up my water pretty quickly. Same with red. Red's very, very powerful. So, but I'm going to start with yellow, because that's pretty easy. So I'm just going to drop a little bit of water in here, rinse my brush. I'm going to do what's called charging. I'm going to charge up the watercolor tray. I might get to orange, although I know yellow and red makes orange, but I've already got it, so I'm not going to bother mixing it. So I'm going to drop a little in the green here. Notice how I go through and re-clean my brush very, very well. A little bit in here, just add a little bit. Wash, 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 wash. And I do have a rag that I can use on the side. And then finally, violet. Now these other two colors, they're brown and black. So the brown and black, I'm not really going to use those. I tend to use brown more than I ever really use black. Black is actually going to be a shade which is going to bring colors down. But right now, we're just going as bright and intense as we can. All right, so let's start. I think I got this stuff charged up a little bit. Just get a little bit out of there. Just get kind of muddy up. Basically, what I'm doing is just soaking up this brush head right here. And I'm going to go right to my yellow. Now, as I'm using my brush, I'm going to want to make sure that I'm going nice and smooth with this, filling it in. This is what we call the wet on dry method. Just brushing it in nice and even all the way around. And you know what? I've made this mistake before where I start working and then I realize I've put the red in the yellow. If it's the first thing, we can work around it. Don't panic. It's not the end of the world. All right. So I've got that one done. Now, I'm going to go with, make sure my brush is good and clean. I'm going to go over here to the red. Make sure I touch the red, because I might forget. I'm a little forgetful at times. Go in here, grab some of this red, really soak that up. Soak that up into that brush head. And now I'm going to come over here to my red, and I'm just going to drop this red straight on, wet on dry technique. But notice how I'm keeping it moving. I'm not stopping, because with watercolor, if you stop, sometimes you can actually create a hard line, and it's kind of hard to scrub that out. Now, I know some of you are thinking, that looks pink, it doesn't really look red. Now, the reason why it looks kind of like that is because it's red, and watercolor is primarily water. So it's going to be semi-transparent. But for this practice, I'm just going to keep going with this, because I just want to get my primaries down first, all right? So Now, I could go to my other ones, but I might be running out of time in class. I might say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and throw down orange, or I might just go straight to the blue. If your water starts getting dirty, don't be afraid to go change it, okay? But I think I'm going to go ahead and jump straight on the orange now because I'm ready for that. My orange is charging. It's all charged up. Really blot that in there. Make sure I put it in the right spot. Because the difference between yellow and red, when you mix those two, is an orange. There we go. Nice and smooth around there. Notice how I'm not jamming the brush. I'm not being aggressive. It's just nice and smooth. That's all you got to do. And I'm going to show you some other techniques in another video on watercolor, so don't worry about that. We'll cover some more of that. All right, so now clean the brush, clean the brush. Red, yellow, boy, if I start going green, I'm going to start making the cool colors. So what I might want to do is just go ahead and finish up with just my primaries and secondaries. I'm going to do that right now. Green is a good color to go next. Go straight to my green, and you can do this in any order you want. I just kind of like to use my lightest colors first because I do tend to muddy my water quickly. And if I'm like out somewhere like in the country, I like to go out in the country and paint every now and then. And sometimes in the city you can see some neat stuff, but I tend to run out of clean water pretty quick. Green, clean that brush, clean that brush, clean that brush. Always, always, always clean your brush. You never want to dip another color into one of these colors on the tray because it will muddy it up really fast. Let's do blue. Blue should be right next to the green. That blue is very dark. See how powerful that blue is coming in? That's why you got to be careful. If you get a little too much, you can rinse off your brush just a little bit. Remember, drag, we're not tapping. And then I can bleed this in, and it might lighten it up just a little bit. Just move some of that pigment around. Here we go. Bam. And I've got clean, 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 clean. That brush, yes. And finally, I'm going to end up with violet. Violet should be right here. So I'm going to drop some in. That is way too dark. Rinse that brush. Rinse that brush. Before I let it dry too much, now I'm going to drop some water right on there. And it's going to bleed some of this stuff out. Trying to get a little control of my brush there. I'm afraid I have made this way, way too dark. Do I panic? No, I don't panic. No need to panic. It's not going to fix anything. So what I am going to do is I'm going to rinse my brush. There's a little trick here I'm going to show you. Get the brush almost dry. I'm going to pull some of this color up. Rinse. And pull some of this color up. Now, it's always nice to have some Kleenex, tissues, or whatever you want to have. Even a little roll of toilet paper right there will help you kind of get some of that off of there. You know, it'll just be a little bit nicer. And that's a nice little violet right there. A little bit different. All right. So at this point, I'm going to store my brush for a second, and I'm going to take just a quick break. And from there, we're going to hit our intermediate colors because we're going to be using a primary and a secondary to mix those intermediates. All right, so just hold on and break time. And we're back. Okay, so some of this might have dried a little bit. Sometimes you can get it done in one class period. Sometimes you really need stuff to dry out before you start getting too crazy, all right? This is not a race. Should be going nice and slow and smooth, getting a feel for the paints, getting a feel for the colors. Look at my paint tray. It still looks amazing. Oh, but look, we got some new supplies here. This is just a random thing of tissue paper, Kleenex, whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever's cheap, whatever you got available. I also use these to blot and to clean up. So, but the first thing I'm going to do, remember I put water in top of the tray here so we can see some of this water. It's just regular clean water. There. And I'm going to fill it up a little bit, just enough so it's at the end of class, whenever I need to clean up, I can just blot that and it wipes it up really fast. So let's start with yellow-orange. Okay, so clearly I'm going to need some yellow. So grab some yellow here. I'm going to drop it over here. Fill that up. Get some nice yellow in there. Rinse that brush. Rinse that brush. Make sure it's good and clean. All right, so now I'm going to grab a little bit of this orange. And I'm going to drop some in there and start mixing that around. Now, if I'm looking at that, that looks pretty orange to me, doesn't it? What I want to do is make sure I have more yellow than orange, okay? But if I put too much red in there, I'll get red orange. So I'm going to keep what I just made, all right? So I'm going to get some, just a dab of this, put this here, and I'm going to get some more yellow. Really clean that brush. You might even want to start blotting your brush with some Kleenex. And start mixing that up. That looks kind of yellowy orangey. That definitely looks lighter orange than anything else, doesn't it? I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it. If yours isn't exactly like that, don't worry about it, okay? It'll be all right. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to start adding some of that yellow orange. Oh, my goodness, it's so light. How can I fix that? There's a way you can fix that. If it's too light for you, you can always go back over it with the same color. Or if you're worried, maybe add a little more orange, right? Just add a little dab to that. Let's see what happens. Watercolor is supposed to be transparent. So if you have too much water, it is going to be very, very transparent. As it dries, it will, so like that water's going to evaporate. So right now, I'm just going to leave that where it is. I'm going to see where I go with it. All right, so I got some orange here, and I'm going to try and mix some red orange at this point. All right, get some orange from here. Rinse, 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 rinse that brush, and I'm just going to just touch the red because red is super powerful. Put it up in my corner here. Nope, I think got overpowered. Overpowered, oh no. Rinse, rinse, rinse. Rinse, rinse, rinse. Grab a little bit of that orange. So I want to soak up a lot of this. If I have my dry brush, it'll help. Grab some more. Just put it around it. Now I can just kind of mix some of that in there. What I'm trying to do is create more orange than red. Trick, if it's not working, blot it. Soak up some of that pigment, some of that water and paint. And it's looking more red orange than that red. I might still not be 100% happy with it. So I'm going to sneak over here to the orange that I've already created. I'm going to drop some in there just a little bit. This is my mixing palette up here. I can do whatever I want up here. All right. And it might come out. It might not turn out exactly like you want it. That's why we're practicing. I think I'm going to go with it. Let's see what happens. Well, it's definitely not as orange as the orange, and it's not as red as the red. So I think we could use it. It seems so light, so transparent. Why? It's too much water. Too much water. Let's soak up some of this stuff and drop it back on. When you got wet on wet like this, see how that water just bleeds right in? That's a real fun technique to use. I might add just a hint of this. Why not? Let's just play with that. Let's just see where this is going to go. Add a little bit of red, more red to that. Just got to be careful. Got to be careful that it doesn't turn orange. Let's leave that there. Hey, let's look at our yellow orange. It's kind of yellow orange. It's probably could use just a hint more of this. That's kind of what we used. Once it dries fully, it will probably look better. You can always, watercolor, you can always go back and revisit stuff. If you go too dark though, it's just like using ebony pencil and charcoal. Once you go too dark, it's really hard to pull it back. All right. I'm going to hit the yellow, green, and green right over here. Get a nice clean brush. So I'm going to start with some yellow because that's the lightest color. Drop some up here. Rinse my brush, always clean that brush. The top part, like I keep telling you, the top part can be your messiness, that's okay, but the bottom part, you want to keep that as clean as possible. All right, so I've got some yellow and I've got some green. Now I'm going to try something a little different here. It's a little something different. You want to try it, you can, you don't have to. I'm going to put water down first. This is what we're going to call wet on wet. So I've got some of this water here, but you got to be careful that you know where you're putting the water on. You can't just lay it on there because it's clear. So I'm just getting it right in the spot that I want it. Make sure it's all even all the way around. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this yellow and a little bit of this green. Kind of get a yellow-green going. I like that. That's fine. Watch when I touch it. It starts bleeding it all out. I dry it now and go back in. It'll soak up a lot more pigment. In this color wheel here, I have kind of created a yellow-green. It's very, very light. But if I let it dry and go back over it with the yellow-green, it'll darken it up a little bit. Get in that practice, guys. Make sure that if you're doing watercolor, that you make sure you do it in layers and stages. I got friends who use fans and blow dryers and stuff like that, but yeah, I really don't do that because I don't mind just letting stuff sit for a little bit. All right, my little Kleenex is getting a little nasty, so I'm gonna put that to the side and I'm gonna get a fresh one. Fresh one. All right. All right. So I got, let's see, red, orange, yellow, green, and I want to do some blue-green. Ooh. Make sure my brush is clean because I'm not sure. I couldn't remember if I cleaned it last. Dab of the blue, put it here. Blue. So we know that's blue. And I'm pretty happy with my yellow-green right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to steal a little bit of this green. Look at that. Steal a little bit more. Remember, this is my top area. I can go as messy and as mucky as I want with it. Just be careful. I got to be careful. I don't want to go too far with it. Although I think, boy, that came out the best. I like that color so far. We're going to hit it. All right. I didn't do wet on wet action like I did the last one because I'm really happy with this color. But if I wanted to, I could clean my brush and go straight with water. But I think I'm just going to drop this in here and go with this blue-green kind of feel. And layer that in. And if I'm still not happy with it, I could dry off my brush. I just dropped a little water right there, but look, I could blot it real fast. I could actually just get a tab of this green, just a hint of it. Just be careful because it's powerful. And I could drop some in there and just kind of mix the colors right there. Blend with it. Have some fun with this. It's your color wheel. It feels more blue-green. Look at that. It's definitely more green than blue, and it's definitely more blue than green, so we're going to use it. I think so. All right, cleaning my brush. Now I can tell here my water's starting to get a little yucky. All right. Not only that, but the top of my watercolor palette here, my tray, is getting a little mucky. I don't really want to start trying to drop red violet and blue violet in here when I might mess it up really bad. So a little bit of Kleenex. I'm going to put my brush in the upright position, and I'm just going to blot a section out. I'm going to kill off the blue-green here. If I just put this Kleenex in there, it's going to soak up a whole lot. If you can get a Kleenex without the lotion on them, it works so much better. The ones with the lotion, they tend to be a little oily and they kind of soak up a little slower, but that's okay. Whatever you got, it should be available for you. All right, let's soak up this. And another one, and soak this up here. Now, before I jump right into it, I'm going to want to make sure I get a little bit of water and clean that up. So I'm going to finish cleaning this tray off, and I'm going to get some clean water. So we'll take a quick break, and I'll go do that.